Welcome back to Cana. So yeah, now we open this up. Let's go into the underground.
I played this level in Crash to Insanity. Nice.
Well, this is a throwback to that era of gaming.
Alas,
so yes.
Alas, Jova, there are no evil teachers at an evil school.
Well, of course not yet, dude. First we have to go into the sewer boiler room before getting there.
What would a soundtrack for a game like this being done a cappella might be?
I could see a lot. I could see a lot of choir involved here and there. Maybe the typical Irish woman singing in the background. And yeah, I'm not kidding. A lot of people, when they do the whole woman singing in the background, or doing the ahs and whatnot, it's often an Irish woman for some reason, and I don't get why.
I guess the accent allows better vocalization. That at the end of the day, that's basically what it is.
It's funny because most often than not, when someone's singing, you can't always track an accent.
I actually forgot what nationality is Amy Evans from. Let me see. Welsh, actually. Oh, there you go.
Down boy.
Actually, I got the wrong Amy Evans. Magnificent. Oops. That's awkward.
There we are.
Oh boy. It's the other Clark trope.
All right.
Of a Darren.
Yes.
Like, yeah, because it's different from like another kind of similar trope, as in it just is as in it's a different actor playing exactly the same character.
All right. We now have 40.
I found rots.
Yes, another rod. Yeah, we have 40 of them now. Now 62 to reach the next level. So let's carry on. Okay. So yeah.
That's them all, after all.
Okay, so once again, we have to find the relic. So there should be a relic somewhere in here. So, yeah, as you can see, okay, this game kind of goes in the sense that the dungeons of the game are interwoven with the game's world itself, rather than being something where it feels segmented, like in the older Zelda games. This is supposed to be a throwback to. So again, it feels a lot like a proper modernization of the old Zelda formula. So.
So
Okay.
what
I basically have to get my Zelda fix from other games now at this point. This is just me. If you got anyone out there who loves Breath of the Wild, more power to you. Go on.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I mean, so.
Well, I never said it was.
Anyway, so what exactly feels different about these dungeons from the old Zelda games? Do you feel?
Not much. Like I said, but the puzzles feel very much the same. Like, for example, this kind of puzzle we're doing, where we're controlling something from afar to open up a path.
I'm talking more so about what made the Zelda dungeons feel more segmented compared to this than you like? I always thought they were extensions of the worlds as well.
Well, here's the thing. Well, what I mean is that when you go back to the older Zelda games, every time you went into a dungeon, it was always a cave, and then there was this load time, and then you entered into the dungeon, and the dungeon was completely separate from the world. Like when you were in that dungeon, you were just in that dungeon. That's it. You didn't even be able to check the map for the overworld in general. You know what I mean? Like it felt like its own place, separate from the rest of the game. Whereas in here, the dungeons, there's not even any load time in between going from the overworld to a dungeon. You know what I mean? Because everything feels like it's part of the same place. Like everything is overall more interwoven. That's what I mean.
True. I mean, in that case, would you really call these dungeons if they're technically all part of the same world level? Well, okay, granted. I guess if they are still treks in special areas that you can't really backtrack through, then yes, they would technically count as dungeons.
Yeah, you cannot back. Well, yeah, you can. Well, there's still checkpoints in between various parts of the dungeon. So again, the fast travel system is very forgiving. So yes, you can still return back to some other place if you want to, and then come back as long as you find a checkpoint. But no, well, look at it this way. Like it's a dark cave full of enemies and traps and puzzles to solve. It works pretty much like a video game dungeon, really.
So I guess you're not one of those guys who considers dungeons to really only be applicable to the terms in RPGs.
Not really. I mean, this is typically when you think dungeons, you think the levels, quote unquote, of an action adventure, or like you said, an RPG. That's basically what they are. this it's the same thing with the new God of War game. You know, like even though technically everything is interwoven, like this game,
It actually does have dungeon. The key
But that's what I'm saying.
Sorry, go on.
That's what I'm saying. Like I said, even though it's interwoven with everything, you're still going through these caves and you're solving puzzles and you're beating enemies. Again, again, that's what you typically think when you think of dungeons. Like there's an overworld and then there's caves you go in and where you solve puzzles and fight enemies. That's basically it.
Adira's love.
The key to me is how they are if they are clearly segmented. Like say you're doing in this case for Kena, like you have like the main of the village and maybe the road that you're going through, but maybe in between you have this particular segment in this particular piece of a world that clearly has a beginning, a middle, and an end, where it requires specific set of actions, in those encounters that kind of constitute like that of a dungeon. There are games where this kind of distinction is much more needed. Pedro just mentioned the new God of War, where it's pretty clear where you would actually have the segment where it starts, how much it's composed in inside and how it ends. A lot of open world games tends to have that as well.
Whereas in the older Zelda games, like you have this big open wide entrance to a dungeon, like here's the dungeon. Like it feels very video gamey in its structure, if you know what I mean. Like you can, this is the part where I have to go for the dungeon, basically. Whereas in here, they do a better job of making the dungeon feel like a genuine part of the world rather than something that feels like it's here because, we need a video game level.
Then there are games, Jova, where it's technically kind of like not weaponized, but it's put to the entire point of the game, as in the dungeon crawler genre, stuff like Etrian Odyssey or the Binding of Isaac, where they take the concept of just going through one big dungeon in like maybe even if it's segmented in some different areas, but going through like that, the goal being exploring, like that.
Of course, the Persona series.
That's one of the things that I love about.
Yes, well, the DSMT series as a whole, aside from a couple of spin-offs, does feel like that. But it is the traditional sense, kind of like Zelda, where you're like more still like in a sort of a hub. But when you start a dungeon, you feel like you're about to start, and when it's end, you feel like it's ending. So the distinction is still neat in that case.
That's one of the things that I particularly loved about the new God of War. It basically gave me that AAA old school Zelda 3D experience that I've always wanted. Basically.
Yeah, if anything, the Olympus saga of the God of War games feels more actually like this when it comes to its linear structure.
I don't know, Tay. I will argue the Olympus games are clearly more DMC-like in their structure. They're very linear.
I'm talking
He's
about
talking about like how the levels progress.
The pacing and how the actual dungeon are structured instead, like you just said, organically put the story in a more linear kind of way. But anyway, I found in the meantime...
And by Olympus, you mean the original trilogy, right?
The original trilogy and its spin-offs.
There's actually 6.
Virtually work the same.
There's actually 6 Olympus games. The 1, 2, and 3, as well as the PSP duology and Ascension.
There's also the Java game, but nobody talks about that.
Not really.
Java. Now there's a word I haven't heard in quite some
someone who
time.
actually enjoyed a lot. Contrary to what Kadikro said in his Crash Mobile, portable games, I actually did enjoy a lot of the Java games that I played back in the day, like believe it or not, the Peter Jackson King Kong game or like Prince of Persia 3. Ubisoft surprisingly had a lot of good games, but the one that I enjoyed the most was, to go also with what Pedro said before to connect with the theming, an actual dungeon crawler kind of game called Orcs and Elves, actually published by EA of all people. A traditional first-person one, but it was pretty good to the point where they actually ported it to the Nintendo DS, at least to the first one. The same company, if I recall correctly, even did 2 games with the same structure, one based on Doom and another based on Wolfenstein, believe it or not.
I feel like
it's
the
interesting
overall
because
cringe towards Java games is more so directed at that. When it comes to aging, they really age badly. I mean, of course, an older bout of playing games aging badly, like no duh. But something about Java kind of made people think, in hindsight, this is not too dissimilar from, online Java games that you could get on a PC and probably control better here and there.
I guess the better
I do feel like
comparison that you can make is the visual quality of a Super Nintendo title with the sound compartment of a Commodore 64 game, basically.
The interesting
And
thing.
the thing about Java games is like, well, okay, I'll wrap up soon. The thing about Java games is like, well, in their essence, they do feel noticeably cheap. Like, even when you take into consideration when they were made here and there. Some of that does have to do with the circumstances back then, but they have not aged as gracefully as most other older forms of game, essentially. Something like the Virtual Boy. You
Like-
get why it was like that back in the day, still doesn't make it good.
I can tell that they did not strain my eyes, thankfully. But to quickly also mention what I said before I forget before the party's over. The person I was talking about is called Emiko Rebecca Evans. A person from England, actually, but when actually lives in Tokyo. That is why she's working with mostly Square Enix, but a lot of the Japanese companies as vocalist. Oh, it's pretty cool.
For me, what the interesting thing too is that I actually did find. I think I told you this before, but I don't think I told the rest of the guys. I actually did find an interview by Cory Barlog where he said that he was a huge fan of Wind Waker. And he actually wanted to implement some kind of sailing in God of War 2, but of course he couldn't at the time because at the time
The technology just wasn't there. If you, I don't know if you remember if you actually saw it, but the developer interviews that you can unlock in the first God of War game, but I will show because there is to unlock, do showcase that the team always, Santa Monica always were ambitious and wanted to implement very different kind of crazy concepts, but simply could not because the technology was not there yet.
So basically, when he came back from Crystal Dynamics to take the helm of the studio, he really wanted to finally get around to properly, and that's why in God of War 4 you're going through the various Norse islands and the boat and everything, and there's the conversations with Atreus and everything. So that was actually inspired by Wind Waker. Again, you can tell that, and as a long-time Zelda fan, I can tell that when I play God of War, I can definitely tell that Cory is a Zelda fan because, you can the overall structure and design of everything feels a lot like an old-school Zelda game. So.
It's also a good way to actually mask the loading screens, without halting too much the pace, because something more is happening. Your characters are not actually walking slowly or something like that. So I also appreciate that.
That's it. That's the interesting thing. For as much as people debate on the whole hack and slash versus Zelda structure thing, the truth of the matter is that, like you said, too, because I actually saw those videos as well. Because as I was going through the games, I also saw those videos. It's interesting because if you actually take a look at those videos, the developers were always incredibly experimental, even back in the first one. It's just that they couldn't do most of what they wanted. So if the developers had all the necessary resources and tools available to them from the get-go, the God of War series probably would have been a vastly different series.
I'm not quite sure it would have been vastly different.
Especially because, this enemy stands no chance.
That's because Tail I had 3 full balls, so I used that attack 3 times in a row. So basically, I just came through him.
That's very rude.
Remember, this is my 3rd run, Tail. So at this point, I already know
what to do.
Yeah.
But then he attacked Kana, so.
But what I wanted to say is that something that I kept saying pretty much ever since the game was released. Sure, it has. Hold on.
This is where we built our ox. He started as a simple concept, a way for us to work the fields and improve our crops.
Built your ox?
Yeah, we're gonna see the ox in a moment. You'll see.
It's no surprise. It
Oh, it was a mechanical one, wasn't it?
Exactly. We're gonna see it in a moment.
Technology. Again, the thing that I said since the game came out, sure, the camera angle and how you progress through the world have changed, but and you have different tools at your disposal because of also the RPG implemented mechanics. But at the end of the day, the core idea of hacking and slashing is virtually the same. It just have changed the way you approach at it.
And like I've said before, I've always interpreted. To me, that game is a fantastic example of how you can create a context where a reinvention of a series is warranted, because the game, it's not just because of the gameplay itself. Like, the story, if you ask me, demanded a drastic change, because this was the new phase in Kratos' life. Like,
not just that, a different land with different culture and everything. It would be ideal to reflect that also in the gameplay.
So the gameplay basically is working in conjunction with the story, in the same way that this is a new life for Kratos. This is also a new era for the series, gameplay-wise.
I'm gonna agree with Tio. The gameplay is actually really not that different from the original one. Does it have like a difference in how it's layered? Maybe, but otherwise, it still plays similarly enough. Like, I feel like if they maybe had the technology back in the day, it probably still would have been mainly hack and slash. Just that they may have built up on stuff more identifiably here and there. Like, I feel like God of War 4 isn't so much, what they originally wanted to do, all of it. More so, it's them pretty much, God of War 4 still feels like them building off of what they learned with the original trilogy. So I honestly feel like the original trilogy would have still been overall relatively similar. Maybe a few changes here and there, but the gameplay probably still would have stayed as it was for what they were doing here and there. Now, God of War 4 feels like more of an extension, and again, them building off of what they learned from the original. So I can still see them coming to this conclusion if they had the technology back then, just that it probably would have been even, more of what it is, essentially.
And yeah, like you can, like I said before, the more
a farming simulator.
that too.
This is why the game sold much. All the Germans bought this in mass because of this.
Sure. All right, and here's another checkpoint, and let's just get this bit here. There we are. And some jewels.
Thank you, Scrimblows.
What?
The Scrimblow beam Pedro. It's the virtual caricature of the average mascot character that a Smash Bros fan would request Sakurai to put in.
In the meantime, I also got the quick draw bomb upgrade, which makes it so that if I shoot one of my bombs with the arrow to make it explode faster, it deals more damage. So, all right, let's carry on. But yeah, like I said, the idea is that we need to find the ox, because the ox is actually one of the relics himself. So,
considering it seems to be tied to the memories, but the series, it makes sense.
Sure would suck if we had to fight the ox.
We don't actually.
Surprisingly. It's a nice robot model you have. It would be a shame if someone actually whacked it with a stick.
A stick that somehow is powerful enough to break it.
It's interesting because the idea is, it's interesting because even though the staff doesn't show signs of ever being broken necessarily, and of course it can it's kind of elastic in the sense that it can work as a bow as well, but it has tape into it still. Interesting. I guess it's just that same kind of Western type of character design.
It's the same reason why Cloud's Buster Sword has tape covered on it.
Well, that's only in the Kingdom Hearts version.
And it's more of a story reason than anything, because I do remember this being told in interviews. It's literally Cloud remembering his comrades through those. Yes, really.
Okay, sure.
Well,
yeah, I'm not gonna.
It makes more sense than Riku cosplaying as 9S.
Even though, honestly, if anything, it's 9S cosplaying as Riku when you think about it.
Well, Deji, how do you know it's not 9? Well, Deji. Hold on, Deji. How do you know it's not 9S while cosplaying as Riku?
I literally just said that.
Oh, sorry, I misheard that.
Look, I just don't understand why he blinds himself. It's like
because he couldn't bear to look at himself after all he had
Precious
done.
edgy babies.
They explain it in the game actually. To be fair, his eyes couldn't lie, as Mickey says.
And the moment he actually removes that, it's only he immediately transforms. So yeah,
it's something that Japanese writers also really like to do. It's kind of part of the whole, some kind of revelation that causes if the character doesn't allow himself to see, you know.
To paraphrase Z Frank, no, Jerry, that's not a fetish. If a video game writer does it, it's called having a writing reason.
Indeed.
No, you're all weird.
Are we now? Okay, but no.
One of us plays Yoko Taro games, so yes.
Well, two more like, but
Yeah, like two of us do.
It is getting out of hand because there are two of them. But
oh no, I'm looking at my copy of Nier Automata. How did this get here?
You
I'm not even
manifested
joking.
it.
it just reproduces spontaneously during the night.
well, what platform did you get it for, Dej?
PS4.
Make sure to play it on the PS5. It plays at a flawless 60 on there. Because on the PS,
On the Nier edition.
What, Nier Automata?
yeah, Nier Automata. Same thing for Replicant.
Yoko heard what you said and just slid a copy for your window and left.
Why
He does
did
that
you
a
give me a
lot.
copy of Scarlet Nexus as well?
I guess
It's
you
a
like
good
that.
game.
Alright, so here we go.
A nice little bonus.
So the idea, remember, unfortunately, just again, taking from Breath of the Wild, if you're shooting and aiming in the air, the time slows down. So, there we are.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I can't actually pinpoint who was the first game that actually tried to do this particular precise thing, as in slow-mo arrow bullet time while jumping. Because, of course, the first two that you can think immediately about are Breath of the Wild and Horizon Zero Dawn. But if I recall correctly, there has been at least one or two games that did that beforehand.
I feel like there was an older Zelda game that did that. Now that I think about it,
Mm,
but
no,
I can't
I
put
can-
my finger on it.
I can tell that the free Zelda games never did that before Breath of the Wild. I don't know about any others, but Zelda's
Maybe
first was
Skyward Sword with the time travel mechanic with the sand place.
not really,
Maybe
no.
try
I'm talking
Princess
about this
Digital.
specific instance, not necessarily a time-slowing mechanic, that the character has in story. The idea of the rule of cool applied to the fact that you're having like a slow-mo on your own while exclusively while jumping and using bow and arrow. Because if you want to talk about just slowing down time while shooting something, Max Payne is the progenitor of that. No questions asked.
Yeah.
But specifically with bow and arrow, of course, Breath of the Wild and Horizon Zero Dawn popularized it. You can tell that this game took inspiration from those when it comes to that particular move, which is effective. No real shame in saying that. But I don't remember I can't remember exactly where to pinpoint the origin.
All right, with all the corruption in this particular Lagoon, now we can finally get that thing and free the ox. So let's do that.
I mean, considering how much the land is being scorched by the burning, the cleansing is not doing too much of a job.
No.
I don't know. We seem to be patching it up rather well.
Well, yeah, I guess it is better, definitely, but...
But it was still burned to the ground.
Yeah, but don't you see, with our spirit healing, it's back to being lush and green.
I don't know about that.
Sure, right. We've literally been seeing grass turn green before our eyes. Like, right there, too.
All right,
Not
cutscene.
with
Flowers as well, to boot.
Alright.
But first, let's activate him using the bomb. There we are.
Oh, there it is. Oh, it's not necessarily a metal I thought it was going to be a metal construct.
Oh, it's a Colossus.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
Where's the weak point? Can
The
aggressively
eyeballs.
stabbing
They're
it.
glowing.
And his name is Rufus.
Okay.
Aw.
Oh, it's the whole animal behaves like a dog. Okay.
Yes, every fictional animal is a dog.
Who's a
Except
good,
for the
who's a good
cat.
stone bull? Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Hey there. Hey there, Rufus. Look, I'm dead and I need to move on, so can you help me find your other mother?
She's here to
That's a
help
good
Adira.
boy.
That's not naked more. Huh?
But deep down, he's a sweetheart.
Yes, man of culture you are, I see, Dave.
Damn, Rufus had quite the shift when he...
So there you go.
That's the memory,
It was the bell.
Yeah, the bell is Adira's love. So there you go.
So how did they make this?
Oh, well, we'll see. We'll see. He's an invention of Adira. As you'll see later.
Ride him?
And he's a good boy.
We cannot ride him now, unfortunately.
Ow.
There you go.
Oh, but
It's literally a Colossus ox.
The biggest question, however, I'm pretty sure Shira is a better question in mind. Can you actually pet the bull?
No, you cannot pet it, actually.
0 to 10.
Wow.
Worst game ever.
you're hyping this game up, Pedro, and you can't pet the bulldog? Jesus Christ.
And this game was doing so well up to that point.
So wait.
I don't know what to tell you.
So this leads me to wonder, though. Seriously speaking. So when Adira and her significant other get sent off, what becomes of Rufus? Does he just get left behind while his two mothers are sent to the afterlife?
I guess it's the eternal conundrum in what degree is the conscience of a construct, a golem, as in, old mythologies do dictate that these beings do not really, unless it's specifically stated otherwise, do not possess enough sentience to be considered, proper being, which would later in science fiction, be transplanted into the concept of android and, stuff like Blade Runner. Other times when it's specifically noticed that in order to make the construct or the golem, a soul needs to be implanted into it. Of course, it leads to the degree of how much is an original being and how much is the original soul just transplanted into that body. Full Metal Alchemist tries to raise that argument, but it's only a passing moment. But that's the best example I can come up with right now. This is pretty much a case to me that I can see that it was just a construct made up by magic with only a limited degree of conscience.
So welcome to our playthrough of Pikmin 4, where the Pikmin are now edgy. Or at least they look like they were redesigned.
Lips, you're kind of 7 parts too late to notice that.
I only just figured it out. And besides, how many of us are really slow to do something before realizing it?
Well, to be fair, Teo, he does have a point there. Like you yourself said, how did I not notice Morello getting older before? So.
That was Peter intentional bamboozling, from the maker of that series. This is literally a mechanic starts in the first.
No, that's a thing, Teo. If you go back and watch all the episodes again and you pay attention to how the characters look, you'll notice that she gradually gets to.
Well, even
that's the thing. It's so subtle until
even the analysis video that you recommend notices that it's done on purpose, so that a viewer that binges the series does not notice that until they stop and think about it.
Sure, it's because
it a good point that it's definitely more intentional in how it's cleverly hidden. Here, though, it's kind of obvious.
It's literally one of your main gameplay mechanics, stated from the first part.
It's not subtly hinted; it's in your face. And like Tia mentioned, we've literally been making that joke pretty much since.
Yeah.
Although it does remind me, Joba, it does remind me of Mind Jack, where I still need to play it entirely in full of that game because, trust me, it is as painful as reviews told. But there is a huge gameplay story segregation moment where after you spend like a couple of hours doing exactly what the game tells you, the mind hacking as a and everything, the actual game has the main two protagonists, the one that you have been done with you using to do the mind hacking, actually discuss mind hacking for the first time like they did not doing up until that point. It's not even a case of, what have we been doing for the past time? No. It's as if that was supposed to be the first time were introduced. If I recall correctly, there is an actual story reason that, of all people, Yahtzee from Zero Escapist actually predicted correctly. But again, all in due time, if I ever manage to finish that fucking game.
Also, the thing about Anne is we watched all the episodes quite quickly, whereas before it would have aired once a week. So,
That is true as well.
Well, it was mid the 70s, so obviously the creators couldn't count on streaming binging. So this was before home video was even a thing.
It's more the point of like it's even less obvious, you know, Anne and the other characters change as they age.
That being said, like I mentioned in those commentaries, Shiroi, I do really appreciate them thinking out of the box in ahead. I'll get a cowboy hat.
Howdy.
Huh.
Hold on, Kena. Are you gonna just pass him by without saying howdy?
Come on, Ken, don't leave him hanging like that.
Alright,
Incarnation?
so join us in the next part where God smites Kina for being really rude.
But before that, let me
You missed that pun, Kina.
explain. I just unlocked on the skill tree the multi-bomb skill, which allows me to throw 2 bombs at once instead of 1 at a time. So there's that. Alright, see you for the next part, everybody.